Good morning from Riverton, and hopefully we're making it out there. Um, I wasn't planning originally on this live shot, but the decision that came through yesterday. We were expecting at the FCC meeting at the open meeting today, which is starting in about a half hour from when I'm doing this, that we would have a vote on the application cap in the non-commercial educational window. And, the FCC did what they do sometimes, which is take the less controversial items that are on the agenda and then move them off and move them, and then, they can vote on things before the meeting. And that's what they did in this case, because this is such a non-controversial item compared to some of the other items that are on the agenda for today. And, if they can take one item off the agenda and save some time, then they'll do that. And that's exactly what they did here. They actually did that with MB Docket 19193, the LPFM technical changes. So anyway, immediately after, at the same time that they released the information on the outcome of the 10 application cap, they also announced the dates for the window. Now, the dates for the upcoming filing window is going to be November 2nd through November 9th of 2021. Applications can be filed on the 2nd anytime after 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time, and they can be filed up until 6 p.m. Eastern Time on the 9th. So those are the dates that are out there. Now, what we are expecting is going to be another public notice. And this public notice is going to come probably it depends. I have not heard from staff whether they're going to give us 90 days or 30 days on this one. But the FCC will eventually announce a filing freeze. And so sometime probably in the late summer, they're going to put out a public notice. This public notice is going to first indicate that there's going to be a filing freeze. And what the filing freeze means is that existing full-service stations that are below 92, between 88.1 and 91.9, can't file any modification applications to make any changes. Also, too, if there are certain applications in the other part of the band, in the commercial part of the band, may also be impacted because of I think they're going to freeze the whole band. I think that's what they're going to do, and because of the fact that facilities up above 92.1, they can still impact the availability below 92. Stations on 92.1, 92.3. With 92.5 with first, second, and third adjacent channel, as well as on many channels above 92.1 through intermediate frequency, or what we call IF. So there's certain protections, and we're going to talk a little about protections here. I didn't come up with I don't have any pre-prepared slides or anything like that, so we're going to be going into this with just the information on, just the information and, pretty much following the website, the REC Network's website, where we have a lot of this information at. And recnet.com is where you'd want to go, not right now, but later, to look at the information. There's been a lot of questions, a lot of inquiries from all over regarding this window. Obviously, anytime that there's a filing window, there's going to be excitement that's going to pick up. There's going to be a lot of interest. But we do need to clear up a couple things here just so we don't get a lot of people's hopes up high for this window. This window is not going to be, as spectacularly available to everyone as was the LPFM window in 2013. And the main reason why is because of is because of the availability. First of all, there are some huge differences between the LPFM window and this window, and it's really the way that LPFM stations protect other stations and the protection rules in the full service non-commercial. See, in the LPFM, we use distance separation for everything. So if you're more than 24 kilometers away, if you're more than 67 to a Class A, you've got all these predefined circles, these predefined distance separations that you have to keep. And also, too, those distance separations are based on interference only going in one direction, the direction of your proposed station protecting an existing station. Now, non-commercial is a little different. And Bill, I'm going to answer your question in just a moment. Non-commercial is a little different, and that is that, first of all, they use the contour method, which is similar to what we use in the translator world, where, every station has a protected service contour, and then there's interfering contours for each station. There's a co-channel interfering contour, which is the biggest one, then a first adjacent, and then a second and third adjacent channel interfering contour. And the idea is that the interfering contour of one station can't cross over the protected service contour of the other station. And in the translator world, we'll say that interference is kind of like LPFM. It only goes one way. It only goes that the proposed station's interfering contour cannot cross into the protected contour of an existing station. In other words, the translator must protect the existing station. In full service rules, it's a little different, because not only do you have it that way, but you also have it the other way, meaning that the interfering contour of an existing station cannot cross over the protected contour of the protected service contour of the proposed station. And really, this is what causes the reason why we do not have a lot of availability in the metro areas, is because if you're wanting to put a station at a particular location and there's other stations down below 92 that that put either a first, that are either co-channel, first, second, or third adjacent channel, and this is mostly second and third adjacent channel. On second and third adjacent channel, if they put their service contour over your location, the channel's not available. Simple as that. In full service rules, we do not have second and third adjacent channel waivers. Now let me just say, there is a complicated situation where the FCC will allow it for existing stations that are making modifications, but that's a little out of scope for this discussion. One of the things that I did try to advance a couple years ago was a petition for rulemaking to allow some form of second or third adjacent channel waiver if there is a very compelling if there's a very compelling need for bringing a first broadcast service into a rural area that is currently right now being being foreclosed on because a ton of stations in an urban area have taken up all the first, second, third adjacent channels. That has gone nowhere. And we got an RM number on it, and it went nowhere as of right now. I don't think that the FCC will do anything with this prior to the upcoming window. So we'll just have to see where that goes. But this is the main reason why you've been seeing me put out a lot of information. You've been hearing me say a lot that this window is not going to be available in like the top 100 or 150 metro market area. We're getting requests from places, like Southern California, like Orlando, Miami, a lot of these places across the country that are, top cities. You're not going to be able to get it. There's just simply no room. We do offer a site you can go to, and if you go to recnet.com and you click on the potential opportunity maps, you could be able to scroll down here, and you'd be able to, now you could either do it in the range of latitude and longitude if you know that, but we also have some pre-selected areas that you can look at. So if we were to, let's say, go to Orlando, Florida, we have a map here that covers Orlando, Tampa, St. Pete, and Sarasota. We're going to look at this map, and it's going to come up. And I know this may be hard to read on the video, but as you can see, the green areas are areas where there's at least one channel that does not have a second or third adjacent 60 dB contour. It also meets all the other contour requirements. Doesn't necessarily, if you're on the edge of one of these green zones, you may not be able to put a station there. You've got to be deep inside the zone, really. But you can see how there's absolutely no availability there along the I-4 corridor. So nothing between Orlando, nothing between Tampa, St. Pete, nothing along the coast. And this is pretty much the same anywhere. So, we can go look at another city, and we could let's look at the New York City area. And you could see, there's not that much available. Now, the other issue that you're going to have now is, you can see there's some availability in Jersey. The problem with Jersey is going to be is that this map does not take Channel 6 into consideration. And there are 10 Channel 6 TV stations that will also have to be protected in this window. You will not have to protect the low-power TV stations and the so-called Franken FM stations, but you will have to protect these 10 TV stations. There's one in Philadelphia. There's one in Schenectady, New York. There's one in western Pennsylvania. There's one in Ohio. There's one down, there's two down in Georgia. I think one in Alabama, one in, I think, Kansas, and one in Montana that would have to be protected under this window. So, what we're saying is that the availability is just, simply not there for the metro areas. Where it is going to be more available is going to be more for the urban area, for the rural areas. Now, here's the Southern California look. You can see, doesn't look good. Doesn't look good for Southern California. But, if we go to somewhere like, let's look at Bismarck, South Dakota, for example, and let's see what we've got there. Come on. Look at that. Okay, the map is running slow. And there it goes. Okay, so see, Bismarck up here in the upper left doesn't have any availability around it, but the rural areas surrounding it are solid. So yeah, there's going to be, the availability is not going to be where a lot of folks may want it. And, I really don't want to get, I I really don't want to get a lot of people's hopes up. And this is why we put the tools out there. That's why the maps are out there. The maps gave us a very clear, high-level look at what the availability was going to be for this window. And, and unfortunately for the metro areas, it doesn't look good. And I don't see a lot of opportunities where you may be able to sneak something in. I do see that in a couple possible places, but still, I just don't see. I just don't see it. I mean, now that, of course, this shouldn't discourage you completely. You still need to do your research. Use the tools at REC Networks. We have the high level tool that we just showed you, the maps. There's also a channel search, kind of like the one we did for LPFM a few years ago, where you can go in, put in a location, put in a station call sign. You can put in anything, that you put in a location, and it will look at all 20 channels, and it will and it will give you some ideas on what you can look at here. Now, of course, for an area that's not available, of course, it's not going to show you anything here. So let's see what's and if you just want to get a very high-level view of a location, you can always just go ahead and put the city in. And it's going to want an antenna height. And you can do that either in feet or meters. So let's say I know it's 60 feet, but I don't know how many meters it is. I can put in the number of meters and then hit this button that says, I could put in the number of feet, and I push this button that says feet to meters. And yeah, look at that. It computes it for you. And then we come down here and we go ahead and put that in there. Now, if you enter in an address, it's going to show you a map that, if you want to, and the idea is that you can drag the pointer to a location that is actually closer to where the antenna is actually going to be. And then you just click on the Find Channels at the new location, and it give it a minute or two. Be patient. These systems are not the greatest. And eventually it's going to come up here and give you some results. And now this is for Texarkana, Texas. This is a location that I've always been saying, yeah, you can't get it in the one of the rated markets that you can get a new station in looks like it's going to be Texarkana, Texas, and this is the reason why. Now this shows, yeah, there's a possibility of 88.1, 88.3 in that area. Okay, so those are the two channels, but this will also show you why the other channels are not available at a specific location. And it's telling you, like, for 88.5, there's a co-channel interfering contour that goes over the site, and then on then on 88.7 and 88.9, we're dealing with second and third adjacent. That's exactly what I was telling you about. A local station in the same area is going to wipe out 7 channels of availability under this. So you've got this Texarkana station here that's on 89.3 because there's their code channel, and see, that's wiped out other channels. Also, the other thing too is you're also having to protect commercial stations, and the way we do it on we have the intermediate frequency, which is the 10.6 or 10.8 megahertz plus or minus, where there's a very short distance separation requirement, and that has to do with protecting the local oscillators inside of FM receivers. It's a rule that's been around forever. We used to have it in LPFM, and that was one of the things that we got dropped in 2011 with in the 6th report and order. So, and then for those that are around the higher frequencies like 91.7, 91.9, you're also having to protect commercial stations. Like here on this 91.9 example, you'll see that we can't use that channel because it has to protect a third adjacent commercial station, KHTA in Wake Village, Texas. So those are, so that is, so when we look at that, and there we go. When we look at that, it will give you a picture of why we can't do it. And, and again, you really, you can't ask for a second or third adjacent channel waiver. Although I would be somewhat willing to file something myself to say, hey, look, over compelling situation, very small town in the middle of nowhere that just happens to be within, the service contours of these of this unrelated urban area. And, that was the whole idea of that petition for rulemaking a while back. Now, let's, Bill, I'm going to answer some of your questions right now. On the filing freeze has not been announced yet. We normally will get that about 30 days. The filing freeze usually, I think, is 30 days prior to the open of the window, and then the filing freeze lasts until the end of the window. I've heard talk that they want to do a 90-day freeze. I would love to see a 90-day freeze or a 60-day freeze, but not a 30-day freeze, Also, too, another thing, filing freezes in this case should not affect LPFM, and it should not affect FM translator or anything secondary. And that's just because they really have no bearing because, a non-commercial station, and this is also important to everybody, one of these new non-commercial stations is not required to protect translators, and they're not required to protect LPFMs. So what this means, of course, for the non-commercial applicant is they can file on top of an existing LPFM that's below 92. They can file on top of an existing translator. And then there's certain rules that would apply that would determine whether the translator or the LPFM has to be displaced and go somewhere else. And, of course, the noise floor will increase. The interference will increase. And there's nothing that the LPFM can do about it. The LPFM or the translator, they're secondary. They're guests on the dial. And, if a full service application comes in, it gets granted, it goes on the air, then you might have to just pack up your things and find greener pastures if there is pastures available. Absolute worst case scenarios, it could shut down the LPFM or the translator completely if there's no alternate spectrum to go to. The FCC won't give any special waivers or, the only thing that the FCC is allowed to do, and is part of the rules, is they'll let you change to any channel, but that channel still has to meet the interference guidelines. For the LPFM, it still has to meet the 73807 distance separation. For the translators, it has to meet the 741204 contour requirements for translator protection. So that's still there. So in answer to your question, it's not too, if you're trying to file something full service in the FM band, whether it's in the commercial or non-commercial band, you're still able to do it as of today. And like I said, for LPFMs and translators and anything secondary, I don't see that there's going to be a freeze at all. Is there a move to get rid of Channel 6 by NPR? That is something that has been talked about for zillions of years. And I've been talking about it. It's a little out of scope, but I will say this. NPR has in the past made that statement. So when I read this ex parte, that wasn't news to me. That's been the NPR line for many years. That's been my line for many years. This is one of those situations where, I feel that, Channel 5 and Channel 6 spectrum, and especially Channel 6, could be better used for a long-term solution, and I mean long-term solution, to start moving the smaller AM stations off of AM and moving them onto better FM facilities, and eventually bringing in radios that tune down to 76. The radios are available. They're sold in Japan. Japan's current FM band is 76 to 95. They just recently extended it from 90 to 95 for their form of AM revitalization. But the radios that they sell on the market, the wide FM radios that they sell, they tuned all the way to 108. So who knows what Japan will do? Japan wanted to do something called multimedia broadcasting in the higher end of the 90 to 108 band. That never went anywhere. Basically, that was going to be kind of like their equivalent of like a digital broadcasting of some kind, and that spectrum was let go when Japan converted to digital television, and they, like most of the rest of the world except for really U.S. and North America, they decided to completely scrap VHF television. Anyway, little out of scope, but still somewhat relevant. But the bottom line is that you regardless of what happens in 03185, which is the current quote unquote Franken FM proceeding, a full service station is not going to be required to protect those because those LPTV stations are secondary, not primary. So that's what we've got there. So let's move ahead here, and we're going to go back to the web browser here. We're going to go back to, and this is right off the REC website, and this is off of our general information page, and we're just going to go down the items here and expand on them a little bit here as necessary. Now, of course, this window is for new original construction permits in the reserve band. Normally, also, too, during this time, an existing non-commercial station should be able to make a major change. So let's say they want to change to a channel that's more than 3 channels away, or they want to just totally move their station to a totally different area where there's no contour overlap between the old and new location. They'll be able to do that. Now, if they do that, they are competing with the new applicants. So there is a risk that they would run, that if that happened. There's not a lot of major change applications that come in during the window. We saw a couple of them in the 2013 window. And now, the important part here is, first of all, if you're representing a licensee of an LPFM station, then you're already qualified to be a full-service non-commercial FM licensee. You've already met the you've already gone through those hoops already, and when you file your application, all you're going to do is say, "Look, we were already considered a non-commercial educational licensee on this file number," and then you just put in the file number of your original construction permit application there, and that will that will suffice. Now, for anybody who's currently not an LPFM licensee, very important, these stations are not licensed to individuals. So Joe Smith can't apply for a full service station in this window, nor can a for-profit corporation. This window is for any nonprofit organization. Basically, it's a nonprofit educational institution or organization. So that scope doesn't just necessarily mean schools, colleges, and such, but any nonprofit organization that has an educational purpose. And your corporation must be, you must be a registered corporation with a state. And it does not have to be the state that you're physically in, although your state may have specific laws, they call them foreign corporation laws, that state that, if you're going to do business in this state, even if you're an out-of-state corporation, you still have to make a filing in our state as a foreign corporation. So that's something you need to check on. But the FCC will not require foreign corporation. This came up in the 2013 window, and you don't have to file twice. You don't have to file in your corporation state and file in your physical state in order to meet the FCC's requirements. For example, I'm here in Maryland, and I have a nonprofit in Delaware. Totally fine. As I get closer to actually doing business, I'll have to check the laws in Maryland to see if I need to file as a foreign corporation in Maryland. But as long as I've got that Delaware corporation, I'm fine. Also, you do not have to be a 501c. 501c status is not required to be a non-commercial licensee, either full power or low power. And also, too, you need to keep your corporation status valid. We saw a lot of this in the LP window. Every year, you may be required by your state to make an annual report, or file, or make pay a fee, an annual fee. And if you don't, then your corporation lapses. And sometimes you may not even be notified of this from the state. So you've got to keep on top of that. If you're using a service, I use a service that maintains my corporation for me. And then I get notified every so often, your filing fees are coming up. Here, you pay us so much, we'll pay your filing fees and we'll do your annual report. And, and then you pay for them to be your registered agent. And, it's actually a fairly easy process. And out of all the states, Delaware is an easy state to incorporate in. And I know during the last window, Leo Ashcraft was reselling Delaware incorporations, and those are valid. If you're if you're a new applicant in Georgia, and you're wanting to file in, and you want to get a corporate status, and you don't want to go through Georgia's hoops, you can go through Delaware's hoops. They might be a lot easier. Also, some states like Florida, Texas, they have a minimum number of people required on the board. I think both of those states, is a minimum of 3 members on the board. Delaware doesn't have those requirements. I believe you can get away with just a 1-member board and still be able to get on there. But bottom line is, the one important thing, your organization must be incorporated fully, where you've got everything is valid, everything is good on the day of filing. Prior to the time of filing, so therefore on the day of filing, your corporation is valid. You can't file now and then get your corporation later. You can't do that. The corporation has to be established prior to you actually filing in the window. That's very important. We've seen LPFMs in 2013 get dismissed because at the time of filing, they didn't have a corporate status. They got their corporate status afterwards. That does not suffice. You will have to, if you're not an LPFM and you're currently not a licensee, you will need to get an FCC registration number. There's a website you can go to, and this is kind of like just a unique identifier for your organization with the FCC. And all you're going to put in there is the name of the organization, the address. I think a contact person name goes in there. There's a password that you'll set up in association with that, because you'll use that for electronic filing. And also another thing is that it's going to ask you for an EIN, an employee identification number, or TIN, taxpayer identification number. And you can get that from the FCC. From the IRS. That's easy to get from the IRS to sign up for an EIN, and you get that, and you make sure that that's in there. And so that way they can identify. And the other reason for the EIN also too is that in the event that that you lose access, you forget your password, and you need to call the FCC's help desk to get your password reset, one of the things they will ask you for is the EIN that's associated with that FCC registration number, or FRN. In the upcoming window, there will be a cap of 10 applications per applicant. This is what we've been fighting for the past few months now. Originally, I wanted 5 because of the availability in this window. And the EMF, the K-Love folks, wanted a lot more. They came up with this convoluted way of doing things. And so it was not, so the FCC said, okay, we're going to just do the same thing we did in 2007. We'll just leave it at 10. And so that's what they're going to do. So if you're planning on filing, I think most of you on here are probably not going to be filing that many applications. But just be on the watch out for those who are, because this is going to be, there's a lot of national organizations out there, and it's not just EMF, but there's quite a few. They're mostly faith-based organizations that will be filing nationally in the window, and some of them, like we saw in 2013 with a certain person from Texas, may try to sneak and file under different names, and that's something we're gonna have to keep a watch out for. And so I mean, obviously, there's always going to be somebody who's going to try to game the system. So just be advised that could happen. That could happen when we have another LPFM window down the road. But bottom line is maximum of 10 applicants, and also to any individual who is associated with more than one application, more than one organization. So let's say they're on the board of Organization A and they're also on the board of Organization B. They can file, but between Organization A and Organization B, there can't be more than 10 applications. As long as that common board member exists, the 10 cap stops there. So just some things to think about. Again, this probably will not impact a lot of you who are going to be thinking about filing in this window, because you're probably just going to be filing one application, maybe 2. But you are able to multiply file. Now we get to the current LPFM licensees. And we talked about, earlier that if you're already an LPFM licensee, you're already considered qualified under the Commission's non-commercial educational guidelines. It's the same exact guidelines to be a non-commercial licensee for LPFM and versus being NCE. It still has to be an educational institution or organization with an educational purpose. And the other thing is that the organization must, of course, advance an educational program. I mean, it must use the radio station to advance their educational program. One thing I did not mention, and I don't know if it's mentioned further down in this document, is that for organizations that currently are not licensees, one of the things that you are going to have to include in your application is what's called an educational statement. In that educational statement, you need to describe your organization as it is right now. Why, how your organization is either an educational institution or an educational organization. And then you also have to state how the radio station is going to advance your organization's overall educational program. That's fairly, I mean, it's not as much rocket science as some might think. If you need to make sure that you use the FC, you make sure you got to use words like teach and instruct and stuff like that. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to run all educational programming. the First Amendment allows you to choose whatever you want as your actual programming. But, the educational statement basically gets you through the door. It's a formality, and it's what keeps the original intent of Congress for this service, which is non-commercial educational. And, some of your programming that you may run may already be educational already. But if you come in and just say, yeah, we just want to play top 40 hits, that's not going to fly. That's not going to fly at all. But if you use, language like, okay, we're here to inform the community, educate them on various things, on health and and various things, and and the history of music. I've seen that one used, and that one's gotten by. So, there are ways of crafting those educational statements. Now, if you're existing LPFM, you don't have to do this. You already did it, so you don't have to do it again. Now, existing LPFM licensees, listen up. If you file in this window under your LPFM licensee organization, or if you file under a different organization name, but a board member from your LPFM organization is also on the board of that other organization, then you have a conflict. And here's how we're going to do this on the conflicts. Because you cannot have any party of your station, of your organization, having both LPFM and full service. So when you file in the window for the full service, you're going to be putting in what's called a divestiture statement. And in that divestiture statement, you're basically going to acknowledge that, our organization is the licensee of WABC LP, and now we're filing for a full service station. Prior to program testing, this is after the construction permit is granted, and you're getting ready to, and you're constructing the station, the construction is finished, and you're ready to flip the switch on. That's when program test starts. Prior to program test, you will divest your LPFM station. How are you going to do that? Well, the easiest way, of course, is to turn in the LPFM license and just surrender it and say, yep, we're done with this. We don't need this anymore. It's done. It's history. Call sign deleted. License canceled. Goodbye. The better way is to take your LPFM station and pass it forward to another organization, and you've got to do that well in advance of the construction of your station. And you would do that through an assignment. You do that through an assignment application where you can assign the station to another organization. The FCC has to grant that assignment application, and then before program tests can take place, that assignment application has to be consummated. The consummation comes from the existing licensee of the LPFM station that says, okay, the new applicant, the inward applicant, or what we call the assignee, has agreed to all the terms and, paid whatever little bit of money that might have been paid or whatever. They now have the keys. They now have control. We are relinquishing control to them. It's their station now. And at that point, then you can apply for program test and request that you be allowed to turn on the switch to start your station. So bottom line is that if you already have an LPFM station going into this window, as long as you disclose it, the FCC will still take you through the process and will still grant the construction permit, but they will not allow you to flip the switch to turn it on until divestiture takes place. Let's see, what have we got? Let's first of all, let me go back to let's go back and take a look here if we have any questions. No questions coming up in the chat. Feel free to drop in any questions. And, and after we're done here, then I'm going to open up the phones for a little bit, and we can talk here. I don't want this to last too long today. I do have my COVID shot this afternoon, so wish me the best of luck. Now, some of this stuff we've already talked about, which is around the technical details. Now, some people are asking me, what is considered full power? What is considered full service? And full service is basically anything that's above LPFM. So right now, LPFM is 100 watts at 30 meters height above average terrain. That is also the minimum requirement for a Class A full service station, 100 watts at 30 meters. And where you can go from there is pretty much up to if you are able to handle it and if you're able to fit it in there. I mean, you could do a 50 or 100,000 watt full power station if you could, somewhere maybe in the middle of South Dakota. You'd be able to do it. And if you had that kind of money, you'd be able to do it. But bottom line is that it's very flexible. Now, we do use the service classes. We do use A, we do use C3, B1, C2, B, and such, etc. And in the non-commercial world, those classes are important too, because especially because they also drive your protection requirements to the commercial stations above 92. So like a Class A facility is anything up to 6 kilowatts at 100 meters above average terrain, or a 28-kilometer service contour. Anything above that, if you go slightly above that, then based on what part of the country you're in, now you're in a C3 situation or you're in a B1 situation based on where you are in the country. California south of 40 degrees, and the north, and in the area up in the northeast and in the Midwest, where they have Class B and B1 stations, you'd be a B1. So that's where those service classes come into play here. But bottom line is it's going to be a minimum 6 kilometer service contour. Site assurance. New rules that came in this past year or so involves the site assurance. The FCC is cracking down on this for non-commercial. Anytime that you apply for a new station, whether it's for LPFM, whether it's for full service non-commercial, you have to have site assurance. And site assurance is not a formal process. Site assurance is not a binding contract. It's just an understanding. It's a meeting of the minds, as the FCC calls it, or just a general understanding that if the applicant is granted a construction permit, that the applicant should be able to build at that site. Starting with where the FCC is already doing this on modification applications for LPFMs, and they will be doing it in this window. Is that there will be entry blanks on the application that are going to want the name and the phone number of the site contact, site owner, site manager, or whoever that the site is related to. That the actual site is related to. So that way, that they can check, or a member of the general public like myself can verify that that there is site assurance at that location. Now, of course, if you own the property, there is an option in there where you can check that as a no, and you can, and basically it implies that your organization owns that property, and your organization is in control of the property of where the station is going to go. Directional antennas. Now, in translators, there's a lot of flexibility to use directional antennas, and you can use many different kinds of directional antennas. And in full service, in full service NCE, directional antennas are allowed, and sometimes you may need them if you want to get more power in a certain direction. However, in the full service versus the translator, in full service, there has to be a certain minimum amount of coverage in all directions. And this is why they have the 15 dB rule, which basically states that a directional antenna cannot, in any direction, cannot have a signal that is less, that is under 15, that is more than 15 dB down from the main lobe, from the peak distance of the antenna. So certain antennas, like the Scala CLFM type antennas, where there is a very, there's a very shallow back end to them, those antennas are not acceptable in the full service. So basically, what is, twice the power is what, 3 dB. So, I mean, I guess you could say 1/5 the power. I guess you could say that in all directions. And also, too, the antenna must be designed where the directional, the difference in the pattern, it cannot be a pattern that's going to sharply go from, 1,000 watts down to 200 within a 10-degree difference. So there is some, basically, bottom line is directional antennas are messy. And there are specific rules. The antennas that you use for translators can't be used really as you would have to go to SWR or ERI or one of these companies and have custom directional antenna made. That can run into the tens of thousands. You also have the you also have the proof of performance requirements and such, and they're very costly. Very costly situation. If you can stay non-directional with this facility, that's going to be the best way to go. Now, another thing is polarization. Antennas in the full service, with some very few exceptions around channel 6 stations, must have at least a horizontal element to it. So you can run a horizontal antenna, or you can run or you can run a circular cross-polarized antenna. You cannot run a vertical-only antenna. So no Norwalk Dominators, no Comet 95s, no J-poles, nothing like that at all. No CLFMs running vertical. Can't do it. There's got to be a horizontal element to the antenna in order to run it. And, of course, we have that, if you're doing directional, we got that 15 dB and 2 every 10 rule that you got to deal with. So bottom line is there are some rules on antennas, and a lot of that is just to make sure that you're covering as many people as possible with your station. And the FCC is still hung up on horizontal polarization. It's been that way for decades now. Community coverage requirements. Now, here's another thing, too, that you got to realize. When you apply for a full service station, the community of license matters. The community of license that you choose must actually be a bona fide community for allotment purposes. And these are the kind of the same criteria that's used for commercial. This means that, that there must be an actual community there, people who live there that identify with that community. Pluses would be is that if there's a local government, local businesses that have that that have that community name and in the name of their business, local churches, local civic organizations, and such. You will have to make a showing of that, especially if your community doesn't have any other stations, full service stations licensed to it. This is very different than LPFM. We do not have this requirement with LPFM. You could put your city as cell site Montana on an LPFM. You can't do that on this. Now, the other thing is that the community of license that you choose, the proposed station that you operate, that you're planning, must place at least a 50%, 60 dBu contour over at least 50% of the community of license. So basically you're looking at the town limits. We've used, for unincorporated areas, we've used zip codes. We've used various things, but it has to cover at least 50% of the population at the 60 dB contour. So, keep that in mind. If you're putting in a little 100-watt station and it's a very large community, you may not get that 50% coverage. So the FCC is looking for 50% population coverage within the proposed community of license. So, choose your communities wisely. Try to choose a community also that currently doesn't have any commercial stations or non-commercial stations attributed to it. It does look better. Okay, Ryan, good question. So a Nikon 88 BKG 88 would be an appropriate antenna? Yes. The 88s, the BKG 77 88s, if they're used as a non-directional, if their license is non-directional, they're totally fine because they're circular polarized antennas. And there's quite a few, there's a few NCEs that do run those antennas. Those antennas are not great for very high-powered operations, but for your typical, 100 to 1,000 watt NCE station, you're gonna, you'd be able to use them. Of course, for the higher powers, you're gonna want to run multiple bays, so that way the power is distributed and you don't fry the antennas. Okay, so we've talked about the community coverage requirement. Now we're going to get into some really ugly stuff. Mutual exclusivity. This one's always a hard one to explain, so I'm going to try my best. I promise. Now, of course, for those of you who are used to LPFM, the mutual exclusivity there was any other application that was on co-channel, at least, within 24 kilometers, or on first adjacent within 14 kilometers, was your mutually exclusive area. Where your mutually exclusive applicants, they were all put into a group and, everybody had to compete or find another place to go. And in the LPFM world, you are allowed to switch to any channel among the 100 channels in order to break out of an MX group. It's a lot different here. First thing is that, because we use contours and because there's up to third adjacent channel protection requirements, that web expands out much further to third adjacent channel. So if you got two stations in the same area, two applicants in the same area, 3 channels apart, they could be mutually exclusive with each other. As long as both applications cannot be granted, there's mutual exclusivity. So this also means that the area of an MX group, the size of this group, where at least, there's at least one commonality of conflict between these different stations, is it's going to create these large groups. In the 2007 window, we had one MX group that, because of daisy chaining, because somebody was conflicting with somebody else, that the MX group ran the entire state of Hawaii, all the way across all the islands. And in that case, only one application was granted. Only one applicant could be granted in any MX group, if they're unable to break out. And again, we're using the contours now. So yeah, it does get a lot more complex. Also, unlike in LPFM, if you want to try to break out of your MX situation and there's another channel available, that channel must be within 3 channels. You can only do it as a minor change. You can't do it as a major. You can't do these, you can't jump 10 channels like you could with LPFM to clear out of an MX group. Now, the FCC will declare the FCC will announce the groups. Each group will be assigned a number, and it'll be all the stations that are in the groups. Group size can be anywhere from like 2 or 3 applications, all the way up to like 47, 50. Some of these groups were up that high, including the one in Hawaii. Now, the first thing that the FCC does when evaluating these groups, and this is based on information you're going to be providing on the application, especially if you are in a rural area that currently doesn't have a lot of local, and when I say local, that means within the 60 dB contour, full service FM stations down below 92. Because of the Communications Act, because of Section 307B, which is where the Commission is required to fairly distribute licenses among the communities for full service NCE, the way they do this is they give priority to any proposal that, based on 60 dB contour, is able to provide a first educational service to a particular area, at least a population of 2,000. Now, again, what we do there is we look at the 60 dB contours of the existing stations, and then we overlay the 60 dB contour of the proposed station, and we look to see, okay, is there anywhere that is within that 60 dB of the proposed station that is not inside the 60 dB of any of these other stations? Doesn't matter what frequency they're on, as long as they're on 88.1 to 91.9. Those are the channels we'd be looking at. And if there's area there where there's no current educational services, and this facility is proposing this station is proposing educational service in that area, then you've got first service. If there's more than 2,000 people in that area where there's no other stations right now, you've got priority. You override everybody else. Anybody else who does the same thing too will override them. And then what the FCC will do is, if one application, let's say there's more than one application that gets this priority. If one application can serve more than 5,000 over the other, then that application has priority. Now, there's also provisions where if the entire area, has some kind of service already, but there's area where there's only one educational service currently, and you're bringing in the second, and you're able to get 2,000 people or more people in that area where you'd be providing second service, then there's a priority there. But first service will always override second service. And if there is if there's still a conflict between those who got priority, then we go into the point system, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. But so as long as if you're if you're in these deep rural areas where there's currently areas of this country where there is no full service educational station providing a 60 dB contour. If you're in those areas, yeah, there's some good priority. There's some good opportunities there for priority. All right, if you're in an area where you're not able to make that priority claim, there's already at least 2 signals covering every single area of where your station is proposed to go, you can't claim the priority. You're going to go right to the point system, and you'll only go there if someone with priority, if there's nobody with priority in that MX group. So we go to the point system. Point system, a little like LPFM, but a little different. Established local applicants, 3 points. So in this case, the FCC in LPFM, we gave priority to any organization where 75% of the, where that was local and was established for at least 2 years. Something similar here. As long as the organization has been established for at least 2 years and, has a physical headquarters, a campus, or 75% of the board members residing within 25 miles of the reference coordinates of the community being served, which may be, just basically the coordinates for your downtown is basically what it is, the main part of your city. Then you can claim the 3 points. Local diversity of ownership. No attributable interest in any other FM station, AM station, non-fill-in translator within within the area of where you're trying to get this new station in. 2 points. LPFMs will be able to claim those points as long as they include the divestiture statement that they're getting rid of the LPFM station. As long as you as long as you divest the LPFM, which you're really required to do, and you make a note of that, you can claim those 2 points. Statewide network really does not apply to us who are filing at this level. Statewide networks apply to mainly school districts that have, in this case here, at least 50 K through 12 campuses or 5 full-time college campuses within the state, and they're wanting to start a network. They can't claim the 2 points for diversity that we just talked about, but they can claim the 2 points for a statewide network. Technical parameters is the next one, and this is where the FCC will look at how much area your station serves, your proposal serves, versus the other proposals. If you have, if applicant B is able to propose a service that will cover at least 10% more area and population than, let's say, station A, applicant A, then they get 1 point over applicant A. And then, of course, if it's 25% over, they get 2. And it like I said, it's a very sketchy, very tricky way that they do this. But there is a technical superiority provision in the point system. So as you can see, it's a lot more complex in some ways than LPFM. LPFM was just very straightforward. Tiebreakers. In full service, there is really no point aggregation like we have in LPFM. Now, if there's 2 applicants in the MX group and they both decide, hey, right up front, we'll timeshare, file a universal settlement, and you're good. I mean, it is ugly in this side of the house. It's not as simple as LPFM. And the way the tiebreakers will work is if there's still a tie in the point system after all this, the number of existing authorizations that the organization has nationally will come into play. So therefore, a local organization would win over K-Love in that kind of situation. The number of applications filed in this window. If you only filed one application and another group filed 4, you win the tie. Now, here's another provision that was added for this coming window. Whether or not the applicant had filed in the previous window, which is 2007, and was defeated on points. So let's say your organization was around in 2007, and it's been consistently operating since 2007. Your organization filed in the 2007 NCE window, and your application was beaten out by points by somebody else. Then you would have priority if this goes to a tiebreaker. Simple as that. There's also some tribal priority rules which we're not going to discuss here. Contact me if you represent an organization in that situation. If there is a tie, if there's still a tie after those tiebreakers, the FCC will go to a timeshare, and it can be and it can be a forced timeshare. If the groups are unable to reach an agreement, the FCC will assign the hours. You don't want that to happen. You want to make sure that you're able to get into an agreement. Also, if the application wins their channel on points, thus resulting in another group being dismissed by the FCC, that winning group is subject to certain restrictions on moving or transferring the station to another organization for the first 4 years of the station. You're also, bottom line is in the first 4 years, you've got to, for transfers, for assignments, the new organization has to qualify for the same number of points that your organization did. Also, if you were granted a facility based on the 307B priority that we talked about, where there was at least 2,000 population that currently receives 0 or 1 services, you are not able to downgrade your station or move it or reduce your facilities for the first 4 years. You still have to, and if you make modifications, you have to show in that area that there's a population, that the population in that area doesn't decrease in that area. So you can't move your signal away from that area. Basically, you can't take first service away from that area and basically leave those people out in the lurch again with no educational service now that you've got the construction permit and the license. You can't do that for at least the first 4 years. So that's where we've got there. Nature of the broadcast service. This is non-commercial educational. Again, this is not for commercial. This is not for commercial enterprises. You can't run commercials. For those of you LPFM, same rules apply for underwriting. Same rules. If you're looking to make a profit off the station, don't even bother. Don't even bother applying. This is for non-commercial educational institutions and organizations, not for commercial enterprises. And I know there's some that try to sneak around that. But, you get caught, it could lead to fines. It could lead to fines. We saw an LPFM about a year ago get fined $25,000 for commercials. Let's do this. Let's drop down and let's see if we have any questions. No questions so far. we're almost near the end of this, and then we'll open the phones up for any calls. So let's go back to now we're going to get into some important stuff. Now, we talked about educational statements earlier. If you're an existing LPFM, you don't have to worry about the educational statement. But if you're a new applicant who's currently who's not part of an organization that is currently a licensee, then you need to take note of that educational statement that describes your educational organization, your educational purpose, and how the radio station is going to advance your organization's educational objectives. Needs to be included with the application. Parties to the application, we touched on this a little earlier, but since this is, these are involved nonprofit organizations, the parties to your application are going to be your board members. Now, your board members need to be vetted for certain character issues, such as felony convictions. You have to disclose felonies and stuff like that. You do have to disclose any past situations where, they're maybe guilty of misrepresentation. Situations where the FCC may have said, look, maybe they were doing this on behalf of a different organization. You made false statements to us. We caught you. What you're going to have to do going forward is you're going to have to disclose that previous incident where character issues were brought up. And, and then that just that makes the FCC stop and think, okay, do we, on these things, makes them stop and think, okay, is that party rehabilitated enough? Is that party not going to be a threat? They may ask more questions. There may be a notice of inquiry. So these are some of the things that we're going to, that they're going to need to look at. If you have one of those situations, the application is going to take longer than a normal application. Also, too, citizenship requirements. You can without any massive involving Homeland Security type of ritual with the FCC, you can have up to 20% of your board members be non-U.S. citizens. And so basically that means, non-U.S. citizen means that, they are that they are a U.S. citizen either by birthright, by naturalization. Does not mean green card. Doesn't mean somebody who's on TPS, temporary protective status. So even if they're legally in the country, or even if they're undocumented. I mean, undocumented, there's nothing on here that says that an undocumented person cannot be on the board of a station as long as they're within that 20% that, can be alien control. Now, of course, there's other issues. I don't know if somebody would want to advertise that they're on the board if they're not documented because, But, okay, let's say, for example, too, DACA recipients would fall in that 20%. So if you're, so you've got to have at least an 80% citizenship on your board. And we just talked about that there's an extensive, ugly process. Also, the other thing, too, is that all board members may not be on a denial of benefits under the U.S. Anti-Drug Act. And this is asked on virtually every FCC application that there is. Everything from broadcast to ham radio, this question is asked. And the bottom line is that if you have a board member who was, convicted on drug charges at the federal level, the judge may put on this denial of federal benefits, and based on the level of their crime, it could be anywhere from a year to a lifetime. This is the same law that denies people with past drug convictions from getting student loans. It's basically the same thing. So if somebody on your board can't get a student loan, then they're not eligible to be on the board of your station. Simple as that. Yeah. And so again, there's also the cross ownership rules. Now, a board member can be on the board of two different full service stations. Now, remember, we mentioned that if both of those organizations are filing in this window, there can't be more than 10 with that common board member on there. But that board member cannot serve as a board member on a full service station and a low power FM station, even if that low power FM station is licensed to a totally different organization. Can't do that. With this great primary service and not being able to be worried about being displaced by other applicants and such, comes some responsibilities. And this is very important. The licenses are just like LPFMs. They're granted for 8 years. They expire at the same time other licensees in the state do. One thing that full-service NCE stations have to do is they have to maintain the online public inspection file. And this is a service it's on the FCC website. And there's various documents that you have to add once per quarter. You have to add what's called a quarterly report, which is just an outline of what your station did in the past quarter to address the needs of your community, what programming you ran that specifically addressed the needs of your community, what issues were discussed. That's all. And you have to do that report quarterly. It's due, I think, on the 10th day after the quarter is over with. That's got to be in there, and it's just a simple, you just type it out, put it as a PDF, and upload it into the FCC's OPIF system. Now, for LPFMs, at lpfm.ws, we operate, REC Networks operates a system that almost has the same exact look and feel of the full service public file system. So if you do want to do public file and you're still LPFM and you want to look more, if you want to look more like a professional station, go use that tool. It's lpfm.ws. And you can go in there and we allow you to upload your documents. And there's no requirements on that. The FCC doesn't watch that. The FCC doesn't care. You're doing that for your community. You're doing that to train your people. You're doing that to prepare your organization to be a full-service licensee. So that tool is out there if you want to use it. Ownership reports. Full-service stations do file ownership reports every 2 years. They're due on December 1st of all odd-numbered years. There's also ownership reports that are filed after certain events, like the grant of the original construction permit. There needs to be an ownership report put in. With the assignment, there needs to be an ownership report put in. There's a couple situations there where ownership reports have to be done. And on the ownership reports for small organizations like yours, it's actually very simple. You're just going to be basically putting just the names of the parties that are in there, that are part of the, basically your board members. And then every 2 years, you're going to need to do that. Because when the renewal comes up, every 8 years, it's going to ask, is your public file up to date? Have you been making those quarterly reports 4 times a year? Also, have you been filing your ownership reports on time? And if you have to answer no, then you have to explain why. And then guess what? That goes to staff. Staff can decide what they want to do. They're going to let you off with a hand slap, or they're going to administer a forfeiture, or could it go for hearing for possible revocation, depending on the extent of the violations? So, yeah, you want to make sure that you realize that with full service comes full responsibilities. I've seen quite a few full service NCE stations that didn't even know that they had to keep a public file or an ownership report. We're starting to see these, where these stations were lax on their quarterlies, and the FCC's cracking down and saying, "Look, we're going to put you on a program to get you back in compliance. We're going to put you on this. We're going to put you on this consent decree, and you got to start keeping your nose clean. Otherwise, we're going to come back, and this could go for forfeiture, could go for possible hearing. You don't want your application to be designated. You don't want your station or your license or your application, your license be designated for hearing, because that means it could go away. Poof, gone, kaputs." Main studios. Now, at one time, full service stations were required to keep a main studio with an actual storefront kind of location or some publicly accessible location where somebody can come in during normal business hours. Back in the old days, you used to be able to come into the station, view the public file, no more of that. However, even though there's no physical main studio requirement, a full service licensee is required to maintain a local or toll-free number, and that's a local number to the community of license. And that during general business hours, somebody can call and reasonably reach somebody at the station. That's the idea. That's what we got instead of the public. Of the main studio. So that's So if you set up a new station, you're going to have a local phone number that people can call and try to reach somebody. Public notice. LPFM just went through the public notice changes just recently, where and it's pretty much the same for NCE for full service. The newspaper is completely out, so no more having to buy ads in the newspaper when you file for an original construction permit. These days, what you can do is, if your organization has its own website, you can place a public notice through your website, through your organization's website. Your parent organization's website. If you don't have either of those, then you may have to go to the local newspaper or local media, to a local newspaper or the State Broadcasters Association, and see if they will post your public notice on their website. So there are options there. Best thing to do is if you're going to establish a new organization, to file for a construction permit in this window, also make sure that you get a website. Even if it's something free and cheap from one of those Wix things or whatever, just get up a website, get a domain, and then that way when you do file, you can put your public notice there, and that will suffice. Costs. Let's check to see, do we have any questions? All right. Does an LPFM need to have a local phone number? No. LPFM is not subject to the same main studio rules that full service was at one time. The phone number has always been in the rules. Even when we had main studio, there was still the phone number requirement for full service stations, but that has never applied for LPFM. That's one of those rules that does not apply. And as far as normal business hours go, normally, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday kind of thing, just normal business hours. And, and the FCC doesn't really get too much into detail on this. But I would say that there's really no requirement that your phone has to be answered live during those hours. As long as you promptly return phone calls, I think you'll be fine. I don't think the FCC has really ever touched on that for anybody. I don't think that the FCC has ever gone there on that rule as far as times that people answer the phone. Now, there has been times in the past that the FCC has gone after main studios where either the studio is closed during most business hours, or somebody shows up at the studio, and this is under the old rules, somebody shows up at the studio and the person at the main studio refuses to let them in to view the public file. And there has been many cases of forfeitures in those situations, but since we no longer have a main studio rule, and because public files are now online instead of in filing cabinets in station main studio locations, we don't have that problem anymore. Station costs. Well, obviously, building a station, building an LPFM is not cheap, but building a NCE is even much more not cheap. At least the one thing is that you're not required to use a certified transmitter. You can use older equipment. You can use non-certified equipment as long as it meets the other Part 2 requirement, which is the manufacturer's designation of conformity, or whatever they call it. There's two possible ways of getting equipment authorized for use in the full power FM broadcast service. And the one way, of course, is certification, which is required in LPFM, and the other is the other Part 2 method, which is known mainly as type accepted. You've heard that term used quite a bit, type accepted. That's what we're talking about. So, bottom line is, your Amazon piece of junk transmitters that you get from Amazon, from eBay, still no good. But if somebody wants to use like an older Gates Exciter, an older transmitter, keeping in mind that the older gear does have more maintenance and more TLC requirements than the newer stuff, you're able to use it as long as it is equipment that is, type accepted for use in the broadcast bands. So at least you have that little more flexibility. Antennas, of course, we talked about the directional antenna limitation. Keeping in mind, if you're going to be running much higher power, you're going to be running like 6 kW more. Most of these side-mounted antennas, can't handle it all on one antenna. You're gonna likely, based on the antenna, you're gonna have to put in multiple bays. It's very possible that antenna that you have may only handle 500 watts, and if you're running a 2,000 watt radio station, you're going to need at least a 4-bay antenna. So these are the things that you've got to take into consideration when planning this out. You're also going to need to plan out tower space. 4-5 bay antenna can get huge. Keeping in mind that, most antennas are, the bays of each antenna are usually spaced a full wavelength or a half a wavelength apart. We'll say a full wavelength, and just for general purposes, we'll say 3 meters for the FM broadcast band. So that's nearly like 8 to 9 feet apart for each of those bays. So you got to have enough that kind of room on the tower if you're going to be running excessive amount of power. Now, if you're going to be running like 250, 500 watts or so, yeah, you can get away with something much smaller. Emergency alert system. Your stations will need to be equipped, and you're going to need to be equipped with an EAS encoder as well as a decoder. The equipment that you have must have an encoder and decoder capability. For the LPFMs, it's possible that you may already have this. You want to check with your manufacturer. If you don't have that capability, you might be able to get it. They might have to sell you a software key to unlock the encoding capability. So that's something to take into consideration. And so, you know, and your station could at that time also originate alerts. Also make sure that you, just like with LPFM, make sure you're checking your logs every week for required weekly tests. Make sure that that the tests that should be forwarded over the air are getting forwarded over the air. Make sure that your access to iPOS Open through the internet is working, and make sure that you've got a copy of the EAS handbook at your control point. recnet.com/checklist, recnet.com/checklist is a resource that you can go to where you could, now this is for LPFM, but non-commercial is kind of the same, but it helps you go through the various things that an FCC inspector will be looking for if they ever come out and surprise you. And I think after COVID is starting to subside down more and we're more into a state of normal, I think we're going to see more enforcement activity and such from the FCC. So you got to take those considerations. Of course, you know, if you're running more power, you're going to be consuming more power, so you're going to have extra costs. Your current site may not work for full service. If you're currently in LPFM, that site may not work either because of the contour rules or because of RF safety rules. You know, if you're running 100 watts on a rooftop with an antenna maybe about 20 feet up off the roof, and then suddenly you want to go 500 watts, that ain't going to cut it, because you're going to start, you know, you run the risk of exceeding the radiation guidelines for controlled and uncontrolled areas. And so those are some of the things that we look at. You know, you put up towers, you're going to have possible zoning issues. Depending on the amount of power, you may have exposure issues. You may have to put fencing around your tower site. You know, you'll have to put up signs. You'll have to put up the RFR signs. You have to worry about, you know, about those things. So those are some of the things that you're going to have to take into consideration. You may also have FAA issues if you put up towers. You may have, you know, you may have to get an antenna structure registration number, which requires notification of the FAA. The FAA looks at the situation, determines whether the proposed facility, you know, the proposed tower is going to be a hazard to navigation. And if they come back with that, you go back to the FCC, say, look, FAA loves it. Okay, give me a tower registration number. You got to amend your application with that on there. There's also the environmental impact issues. Is your tower too close to a historical site, to some location that's either on or eligible to be on the State Register of Historic Places? There's issues around that. There's issues around being in floodplains and in wildlife preserves and such like that. There's there's various things that we have to look at when we're looking at potential locations. Sticking antenna on the roof may not work at 500 or 1,000 watts. It's not going to work that easily. So those are some of the things that we're going to have to take into consideration. Now, if you're able to pull it off and you want to, you're just going to run 100 watts at your current site, and just basically you're taking your LPFM facility and just changing channel and using the same parameters, yeah, you should be okay. Now, that's the other thing I want to remind you, again, is if you're LPFM and you are currently on 92.1 through 107.9, which a large majority of LPFMs are, if you apply down in this window and you're granted, pending the divestiture of your LPFM station, then guess what? You're going to lose your other channel, and you are going to have to change the channel. You cannot, let's say you were on 107.3 as your LPFM. If you're on 107.3 as your LPFM, and you apply and you want to apply in this window, you cannot say, FCC, just make the 107.3 frequency, make that a primary station, and make that an NCE station. Can't do that. It's got to be between 88.1 and 91.9. Unfortunately, there's no way around that. That's where it's got to be. This window is strictly for those channels. All right. 1-855 Hi Michi. 1-855 HIMICHI. If you have any questions, feel free to start calling into the queue. 1-855 Hi Michi, because we're almost done with this stuff, and I want to just go ahead and take calls. If you call in, what will happen is the connection will ring through to here. It'll auto answer. You may hear me talking. If I don't have your pod up for the phone, I won't hear you. You may hear me, but I won't hear you. And, just wait for me to prompt you. Also, make sure you turn, if you do that, make sure you turn your computer speakers down. The performing rights organizations, ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, they have a different rate schedule for full service NCE. Full service NCE, they use a scale that's based on the population within your 60 dB contour. And they have two different scales. If you are if your station is talk centric, more talk than music, then yeah, there's one schedule. But if your station is more music than it is talk, there's another rate. And then, of course, for streaming stations, same thing with having to go through BMI, CSAC, ASCAP, also Sound Exchange. So those are the considerations that you have to take. Like LPFM, the FCC does not charge any filing fees for any applications that are filed for non-commercial educational facilities. So so at least you'll save a couple bucks there. Now, REC is going to be providing services in this window. I've already put out quite a few self-serve tools out there. You've got the self-serve maps. You've got the self-serve channel search. Those are the first places to go. Because I can tell you, I've been saying no more than I've been saying yes to inquiries. Because a lot of folks are looking for these stations in more urban and suburban areas. And it's just simply they're not available because of that whole 20 channels and because one local station will wipe out 7. The channels are just not available. Is there a chance that an LPFM going to NCE could lose both? No. And I'll tell you why. When you apply, if you're currently an LPFM and you apply for a non-commercial original construction permit, you are going to have to disclose that you're an LPFM licensee. You're also going to have to include a statement in there saying that you are going to divest the LPFM prior to program test of the full service station. So here's what happens in this case. Assuming that your application is successful and you'll get granted the construction permit, 3 years. Now, during that 3-year period, you are basically you are allowed to construct. And then at the point of construction, your construction permit will have a condition on there that says that program test is not authorized until after the LPFM station is divested. So during that period of time, what you'll have to do is you'll have to divest yourself of, your organization will have to divest themselves of that LPFM station. They'll either have to assign it to another organization, and then that organization has to, accept it, and go and the outward organization, the existing organization, has to file a consummation notice with the FCC to say, yes, we've transferred it over. It's no longer in our hands. At that point, when that consummation is filed, then they can request program test authority from the FCC and then flip the switch on. If the licensee, if the LPFM wants to just get rid of the station altogether, they can request surrender of their existing license, simultaneously file license to cover requesting program test authority, saying that they have got rid of their LPFM through surrender. And then at that point, the FCC is good with it. They'll have program test authority, and they can go on the air and start operating. If you're in that situation, and as we get closer to construction, and you're working with me, just get with me. We'll work it out. But there would not be a situation where you're filing for a full service station and then suddenly your LPFM goes away, at least from a licensing perspective. Now, of course, you may run into some other problem where you divest the station, you divest your LPFM, and then all of a sudden at the NCE side, not at the fault of the FCC, not at the fault of the regulations, but you lose the site and you got no other place to put it, And, of course, we go through the whole process, like if the station's already licensed, going through the silent part or going through the situation. Now, there may be time that you'll have no station in that case. Or if you're running up against the 3-year clock for the construction permit, then you may lose it. But there's nothing there's not a rule that would cause you to lose both. Only circumstances would cause you to lose both. In these little unforeseen types of circumstances where you lose access to the new site. That's the only situation I can think of in the top of my head. 1-855-HI-MECHI if you have any questions. And if not, we're about finished here. So that is the NCE window in a nutshell. So again, we're going to be expecting to hear from about a filing freeze at least 30 days prior to the opening of the window. Window is November 2 through November 9th of this year to 2021. If you want REC's assistance with filing, you can call 1-844-REC-LPFM. We are going to be setting up an easy form, and that's one of the things I'll be working on this weekend, pending how well I feel after this COVID shot that I'm going to be getting later today. We're going to set up an easy form that if you are interested in an NCE station in this window and you want REC's assistance, all you have to do is fill out this form. We're just going to ask a few basic questions, contact name, information about the organization, your educational purpose, just a couple questions like that. And then we'll get back to you via email. And that would, and also too, the form will ask, you already have sites that you're interested in actually placing the station at. So that way I can check these sites for you. See, it's hard for me to check sites, say, I get these general questions. Okay, is it available in Podunk? Okay, do you have a site in mind? Get your sites first. Get your sites first. And then we'll go from there. Ryan, there's no charge to file the easy form with REC once it's online. Once that form is online, it's just a show of interest form. What that does is it takes that information and then drops it into one of my systems that allows me to track it. And it's just a place where I can have all the interests in one place, because I'm getting them left and right. I'm getting them over Facebook. I'm getting them over various things. Filling out the easy form it's kind of like filling out your taxes through H&R Block. You just answer a question, hit continue. Answer a question, hit continue. And all we're going to ask on there is the name of the organization, the contact name, phone number. What association this contact person has with that organization. I mean, again, it's just very simple stuff. And just basically asking about the organization. I want to make sure that we're working with bona fide, non-commercial educational or organizations and institutions. I want to make sure that the organization would even have a chance at qualifying at being a licensee. Basically, it's to weed out individuals who are not planning on getting a corporation, and those who, and those commercial enterprises. That's the reason why we ask these questions. Just a few simple questions. Don't worry so much. You worry about everything. Don't worry so much. Oh my gosh. All right, let's see. All right. Well, we have no calls coming in, so all right, I think I'm done with. I've got everything I wanted to cover. I'm just gonna last chance. Any other questions about the upcoming window or any other information? Just a reminder, you can go to recnet.com. When you go to the website, in the upper left-hand portion of the menu, there is an option that is for the 2021 filing window. It's a pull down, and you can get the general information, basically the screen that we looked at during this presentation. There's a channel search. There's the opportunity maps that I showed you very early on, which is just that very high-level map with the green dots. And then on there, too, is a schedule of fees and stuff I plan to charge in this window for applicants. We are cutting breaks for LPFMs. You'll see that in there. We're also cutting even more break for an LPFM station that's wanting to specify no more than an LP250 facility. This is kind of our concept. This is kind of our booby prize, I guess you could say, for the fact that we were not able to get LP250 as a service in the LPFM space, at least not yet. Still work that needs to be done there. We need our fifth commissioner. We need the president to appoint the fifth commissioner first before we can really do anything. Again, recnet.com has a lot of your information. On Facebook, we have a new, what is it called? New potential, let me get the exact name of it here. It's a Facebook group that we run for new, potential NCE licensees. What do we call that? Future LPFM/NCE broadcasters. That's what it's called. You look for that on Facebook. And we could, if you get on there, make sure you answer. There might be questions on there to answer. Make sure you answer the questions, and we'd be good. Michael asks, I have a LPFM, but like an NCE at the same site. It may be possible. Use the self-serve tools at recnet.com. go to the go to the channel search there, and you can just go ahead and put in your location, your call letters for your LPFM station on there. Select the antenna height. Keeping in mind that the higher powers may require you to have to go to higher heights because of the whole radio frequency radiation. I want to clear something here because Bill brought up a question. Those are not the green dots on the high level maps are not sites. They are basically like 6-second by 6-second locations where at that specific location there is at least one channel that doesn't have a prohibiting contour. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to be able to put something there. You actually want to work your way further into the cluster of green. You can't just put something right on the line and say that's it. That's just the outer boundary of the area where there is at least one channel that doesn't have a prohibiting contour. And those are the areas where, where it'd be more likely. The further in you get, the higher the power you can get, the more you can spread your contour out and not step on anybody else. But that map basically is okay, if you don't have a green dot, you can just stop right here. If you do have a green dot, then let's go look further. Go to the other tool. Go to the self-serve channel search tool. Look there. And then if it looks good there, or you think it might look good, or, you get some weird result, because that thing will give weird results, especially on the power levels. The power levels are not always right there. We only look at up to 1,000 watts, and we just basically do it by just growing the contour out. But some contours for other stations are weirdly shaped, and we do have some issues with those. So the best thing to do would be, is if it looks like it may be available there, put in a show of interest form once we have that online. And we'll announce that on Facebook. We'll announce that on the REC website when that form is available. And you'll be able to go online and just let us know that you're interested in an LPF, in a full service station, and you're in one of these rural areas. So again, top 100 markets, completely out. Maybe the top 150 are pretty much completely out. It's just not going to happen. There's just no room. There's only 20 channels. A local station already in the area basically takes up 7 channels from your opportunity. Totally different than LPFM. But for those who are lucky to be in areas where you can get it, we're here. 1-844-REC-LPFM is the phone number for REC. However, I would ask that for this type of situation that we go through email or we go through the show of interest form once it's up. So that way I have a written record. And get your sites in order. You got to have those sites available. You got to know where you're going to be putting this thing. And keeping in mind that there is the community of license coverage requirements that you got to deal with. There's the contours that you got to deal with. And depending on where you put it, there may be zoning, safety issues, and things like that. We're dealing with higher power now. This is more power to you. More power is possible. But with that power comes responsibilities. And we'll be there to help guide you through it. All right, that's it for me. I do want to thank everybody for being online with us here today. And we will hopefully talk to you all soon. And again, thank you very much for watching. And take care. Stay safe. We want to see you tomorrow. So just stay safe. And again, we'll chat soon.